Okay, I think we're going to get started. For those of us here with us, welcome to the Spain Pavilion at COP30. For those of you dialing in from wherever you are in the world, thanks for joining us today. We're here in the Spain Pavilion in Belém, on the edge of the Amazon in Brazil, and we are here with some amazing partners and Spanish organizations. We are very grateful as Science Based Targets Initiative to be hosted by the Spain Pavilion, and excited because Spain plays a really important part in ambitious corporate climate action in Europe and around the world. We're here today with some trailblazing organizations looking back at the last 10 years since the Paris Agreement, the last 10 years of the Science Based Targets Initiative, hearing from some of these partners and organizations about their experiences and looking forward. My name's Tracy Wyman. I'm the Chief Impact Officer at the Science Based Targets Initiative. We're an international NGO that exists to drive ambitious corporate climate action at speed and scale. We do that by helping companies understand how to set ambitious corporate climate targets and by giving them tools and guidance to help them set those targets and implement their transition plans. I'm here today with a fantastic panel, and I'm going to introduce very quickly, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we've learned about corporate climate action in the last 10 years. So my panel, starting to my left, I have Manuel Pulgar Vidal, who's the global climate and energy leader at WWF, former COP20 president, and an SBTI trustee. I have Rosa Diaz, who leads environment and climate change at the UN Global Compact Spain, one of the biggest global compacts in Europe and most active. I have Liz Tardin, who's the head of corporate sustainability at Neoenergia, which is a subsidiary of Iberdrola. And I have Laura Fernandez Cavas, climate change and sustainable finance expert at Telefónica, very well-known Spanish company. Okay, before we get into discussing with our panel, I'm just going to share some of the key findings of a report that the Science Based Targets Initiative just published about the business case for setting science-based targets. So give me one moment. So this report is the most comprehensive analysis conducted to date on the benefits of setting science-based targets. It draws on three complementary sources of evidence. So first, we surveyed 171 companies all around the world. These are companies with validated science-based targets for at least the last 2 years, and we asked them about their experiences and their justification for why they wanted to set science-based targets and what benefit they've seen from that. We created a literature review of 22 academic studies and corporate analyses. So we looked at who's been looking at whether high ambition corporate climate action works, whether setting science-based targets works, and we dug deep into those studies and examined. So these are studies that were published between 2021 and 2025, all quite recent, examining the effects of target setting, including emissions reductions, market dynamics, and financial resilience. And then we created 3 deep dive case studies. So we went to companies who have set targets and are working to implement them, and we looked into the impacts that they've seen. We looked at different sizes of companies and set those out in the report. So this report is available on our website, but I just want to share some of the key findings. Firstly, we now have evidence that setting science-based targets has real-world impact. Business advantage, not just climate impact. Companies with validated targets reported stronger market positioning, stronger investor confidence, and stronger strategic cohesion. And this is something we hear from companies that we talk to a lot. Corporate climate action and their targets isn't just about their emissions reduction, it's now a core part of their strategy. 91% of the companies said that science-based targets had a positive impact on their business overall. with favorable impacts on reputation, strategy, and long-term financial performance, 91%. We learned that climate action powers business strategy and pays off. Businesses reported that targets align their supply chains, reduce risk, and boost their long-term finances. We also heard that science-based targets strengthen business resilience in what seems to be an increasingly volatile world. Companies with validated targets reported improved preparedness for regulatory shifts, and we do hear that a lot from companies that we engage with. Preparation for market disruption and climate-related risks, making them more resilient in the face of uncertainty. 66% of the companies we surveyed saw benefits in preparing for a carbon-constrained economy, and 62% cited greater resilience against transition risks. 80% of the companies said that science-based targets improve their strategic cohesion and long-term vision, while 74% reported stronger alignment with their supply chain and their customer requirements. We very often hear companies say why they set targets is because customers ask them to, and that they are enjoying engaging with their suppliers on cascading their targets down through the value chain. 95% of companies reported improved reputation and stakeholder relationships after setting science-based targets, with 80% citing a positive impact on investor perception and relations. And I think maybe one of our panelists will talk about investor relations. Let's see. From ambition to action, targets accelerate decarbonization. 80% of companies said targets had a positive impact on the pace of their climate action. So the business case is clear. Companies setting science-based targets are building the foundations of future success, and we're going to hear from some of them today. So I would like to start, just set the scene. 10 years ago, the Paris Agreement, Manuel was there. Maybe some of you were also there. The Paris Agreement set the foundation for ambitious climate action. And to bring that mission to life, the founding partners of SBTI, WWF, UNGC, WRI, and CDP, who were later joined by the We Mean Business Coalition, got together and they said, hey, companies are talking about net zero targets, but nobody knows exactly what that means. We need to create some frameworks and provide some guidance. And that's going to be the new accountability framework that will set the bar for high ambition corporate climate action. Manuel, I'm going to start with you. From your point of view as a former COP president and WWF's climate and energy lead and one of SBTI's trustees, what does this decade of action tell us about the power of collaboration between policymakers, business, and civil society?
Thank you, Tracy. Look, we know that we are not on track, that still more ambition, more action, it must be developed, because we have to align our actions to achieve the objective of being net zero by the half of the century and not to go over 1.5. That is clear. But on the other hand, it is true that since Paris, we have strongly progressed. So because of your question, let me put things in context. So 10 years ago, 11, I used to be president of COP20 in 2014, so 11 years ago, I remember that we used to have discussions of this process because of COPs, mostly by parties, and out of the venue, business sector, some groups trying to discuss what it could be the role. And that happened in Warsaw in the COP19, and that was the traditional way of thinking. Parties negotiating, business sector doing by themselves. So we decided in Lima that we have to create some place in which we could bring companies into this equation, that we should bring corporations into being part of this climate debate. And that was the first time ever in which we created the action agenda. It was created in Lima. That original title, it was the Lima Paris Action Agenda because it was created in between Peru, France, UNSG office and UNFCCC Secretariat. We therefore decided to launch this platform. And it's amazing because 11 years after that, it's amazing how instrumental the action agenda it has been to progress in defining more clear actions and immobilize the business sector into achieving more ambitious targets. So having said that, let me complement with some ideas. Tracy has already mentioned the creation of SBTI. And look, because your question it is about collaboration, I will repeat some of the founders of SBTI. WWF and RRI, NGOs, civil society organizations that were able, with some others, with Global Compact, then Women Business, that were able to launch a system that it has been able to create credibility and to build legitimacy to have the business sector joining it. And you can't imagine how important it is, that legitimacy. Because it is not as simple as to take this notebook and to write a standard and launch it and, okay, joined it. No, it is not. A sector as important as the business sector will join something because they know that even they can build credibility by being part of this journey. And that has been the journey of SBTI for more than 10 years. But not to take too much time, let me add something. In these last 10 years, I think that in some way, what we have created, it is an ecosystem. Because again, it is not enough to have a standard. No? We do need to have an ecosystem that can contribute to have all the actors looking in the same right direction. The standard, it is a key element, but there are many, many others that must be part of this ecosystem. And that is something in which also we have extremely progressed. Let me say a last thing in relation to all of these last 10 years. When we launched the action agenda, it was mostly to convene actors because we knew that that would be instrumental to get the agreement that fortunately we did it in Paris. And we knew in the beginning that it was without not too many rules and we convened many actors. Then in Glasgow, in COP26, I think that the action agenda jumped into a second phase, the phase of triggering more action because of campaigns, the Race to Zero, the Race to Resilience, the sectorial breakthroughs. Now we are entering into a time in which the action agenda, it must be the economic agent to show how much the economy is maturing to continue moving this process forward. Even more when we have the current geopolitical difficulties and challenges, denialism and resistance. So let's make all of these 10 years of lessons learned something that can make us able to show that it is the economy that will move the process for the next, I hope, at least 10 years. And that is something that the business sector will appreciate. When it is about the economy, we all understand that we are going in the right direction, in the same boat, for sure with difficulties. But I am pretty sure that this will continue moving the process forward. So that is my first reflection in relation to your first question.
Thanks so much, Manuel. I love how you set the stage with this framing of the system, because SBTI, really, I can't say enough, and I've said it over and over again just in this last 2 weeks of this COP, that the founding partners came together and created this thing. It has been built on by all of the companies that embraced it, right, and that continue to embrace it. And SBTI really is a collective. It's a collective action, it's a collective effort, and it is owned by the system that created it. So we couldn't be prouder to be here 10 years in, but also to look forward to what we're going to collectively achieve later. I want to move on to Rosa. UNGC, the UN Global Compact, has been involved from the beginning. What have you seen in corporate climate action over the last 10 years?
Thank you, Tracy, and it's a pleasure to be here representing UN Global Compact Spain. As UN Global Compact, we've seen a significant progress in climate corporate action. We've seen that the numbers of companies joining SBTI has increased. Indeed, in a report we recently released, we saw that 20% more companies, Spanish companies, joined SBTI since last year. And even talking about SMEs, we've seen a progress of more or less 22% of companies joining SBTI for the simplified progress. So we've seen that, and as one of the founding partners of the SBTI, I would like to come back to the point you mentioned, which is the importance of collaboration. We see that it's key that we have these multi-stakeholder partnerships between NGOs, businesses, and also governments to foster action. And it's crucial to create this enabling environment for companies, these sharing spaces where they can introduce and exchange best practices to solve the challenges they face. So collaboration, I think, is key. Also, it can help companies to set these ambitious targets and report transparently to see mechanisms on how they can report, and they can also foster this sense of responsibility. That's we've seen, that if you create this enabling environment, if you create these opportunities for companies to exchange their challenges, then there is a feeling of common responsibility and a collective action that can be farther, that can go farther than we are. So I think it's essential to create these spaces, and for that we require to keep on working with these companies. In Spain, we already do it with 1,800 companies. As you mentioned, we are one of the biggest country networks in Europe, and our plan is to keep on doing that and keep on working with SBTI and other organizations that help these companies to set these ambitious targets.
I'm just going to follow that question with one. If you think about the findings of the report that I summarized, which ones stand out for you when you think about Spanish companies? Why are Spanish companies setting targets, and what benefits are they seeing?
I think that the link of sustainability and competitiveness, I think that we already understood that, and we now see that long-term strategies in sustainability becomes a competitiveness and a resilient strategy. So I think that's key for companies.
Okay, thanks. So I mentioned almost 12,000 companies have joined the initiative. We've heard that setting it up and building it over the last 10 years and the wider work of promoting and supporting ambitious corporate climate action is all about collaboration. But we want to just pick that apart and see how companies that have set targets, that want to set targets, how are they actually going about it? So I'm going to start with Liz from Neoenergia. So Neoenergia is about to publish science-based targets. I'd like to understand your experience a little bit. So Iberdrola has been a pioneer in the energy transition. Can you share a concrete example about how setting science-based targets transformed your corporate strategy or has impacted your investment approach?
Yes, of course. So setting a science-based target has been a turning point for Neoenergia. And since Iberdrola's target were approved in 2021, we had felt the need to bring this commitment to Neoenergia too. And it has been a challenge since then. And I've seen how these targets move decarbonization from ambition to real action in the companies. And they shape investment priorities toward renewables, smart grids, and digital efficiency solutions in Iberdrola a long time ago. And I saw the recent report, the recent SBTI report, and this is very interesting because it shows that companies with validated targets reduce emissions twice faster than peers. And we are glad that we are in this process. And for Neoenergia, the challenge of approving our target was already in our investment plan. It was organic. And I don't know if you all know who Neoenergia is, because it's a Brazilian company, it's a subsidiary of Iberdrola, and is one of the largest energy companies in Brazil, and we are in the whole sector in energy. So we are in generation, transmission, and distribution. And even though decarbonization was already part of our investment plan, setting SBTI targets help us to build a decarbonization strategy, as you were telling us here. Special to achieve net zero. So, but we believe there is still a path ahead. So for this reason, I'm thinking here, but I have two good examples to explain you. And when it comes to hard abate emissions, we have the example of Noronha Island here in Brazil, and we have just announced this weekend an exclusive investment of 350 million reais for this island, for decarbonize this island, and this investment designed to transform the energy matrix of the island. And the other example is the green hydrogen plant we are building, and we are about to launch this green hydrogen plant in Brazil, in Brasilia. So these are two examples of what we still need to do.
Fantastic. I want to just make an observation that Neoenergia is a subsidiary of a huge energy company, Spanish company that set targets several years ago. It's not easy, right? Especially for an energy company to set science-based targets, but we do often see this cascade from parent to subsidiary. Sometimes it works the other way, right? An ambitious subsidiary sets a target, and then the parent and the subsidiaries of the parent look and say, oh, they did it. You know, I think we better do it too, right? So, congratulations. I want to move on to Laura. Laura, Telefonica operates in a high emission, high impact sector. What practical steps did your organization take to embed science-based targets in your value chain? And what lessons could peers take from that?
I'm going to take this out. I'm sorry. Didn't realize. Hello, everyone. So Telefonica is a telco operator, just in case not everybody knows. We are a Spanish company, but one of our big markets is here in Brazil. Because we are talking about the last 10 years, I can give you a first example by saying that we have reduced in 10 years in what we call direct emissions, so scope 1 and 2, what depends directly on the Telefonica business, 84.8% in 10 years, because we are talking about 10 years, what has happened since Paris. But if we talk about what we call a scope 3, that is what Tracy was asking about, so what about your value chain? then it's not so easy because, for example, in 2024, to give you a round number, around 1.9 million tons of CO2 of the 2.2 total tons of CO2 of Telefonica were coming from this scope 3, so our value chain. So how can we impact in third parties so that they can also align with decarbonization targets? Telefonica was the first telecom company that was validated by science-based targets, including this scope 3, so scope 1, 2, and 3, and our net zero target. So how are we planning to decarbonize the company in terms of numbers from here to 2040? These are like the big numbers, but because you asked me about a specific example and how to lend it, I bring here a couple that has happened in fact since this new validated science-based target. One of them, we call it the campaign of CDP supply chain. So what we do here is that we have, in last year, 2024, we selected more than 180 suppliers that were impacting most of our emissions, and we invited them to complement this CDP supply chain and be part of this campaign. So when they do that, then we bring them to what we call a supplier engagement program, right? So what we do that is that we analyze the answer that they gave and we put in place an improvement plan. And we talk about this analysis with the supplier. We let them know, because what we do with this result is that we kind of prioritize those suppliers that participated in 5 different carbon maturity, let's say. So from less maturity, close to their strategy, goals, actions in terms of decarbonization, to more maturity. We share this action, we share this analysis with them, and we, based on commitments, do an improvement plan with them. Okay, that's CDP supply chain campaign, and then we have this supplier engagement program. Then from this supplier engagement program, we select a few suppliers and say, okay, but you are more mature in carbon development, in decarbonization, so we are going to sign an additional commitment between each other, and you are going to commit with science-based targets and validate your goals in the coming years. And then for some other suppliers that are not just relevant for Telefonica, but relevant for the whole sector, because I guess this happens in all the sectors, that some suppliers are relevant for many companies in the same sector. So for some very high maturity, prioritized ICT sector suppliers, we also invite them to participate in an additional program that we have. In this case is within we call it JAC. It's a joint alliance that we have, in this case, the ICT sector, the telecom operators around the world, where we promote jointly that our suppliers work and develop less decarbonized products, better decarbonization pathways for their emissions. So these 3 initiatives, one with the sector, 2 of them with Telefonica, one with CDP, one related to science-based target. It's about 2 main things. First of all, and you mentioned, consider this part of an ecosystem, and also work with our suppliers from a proactively positive perspective. So let's work together, let's put improvements in place, let's see how to move forward, let's define timings, right? So we give them this chance. And the second one is not to do it on our own. So when we see that the impact is much beyond Telefonica, we have a bunch of associations that can impact bigger, harder, and longer, and we try to bring this initiative to joint initiatives so that with less resources, we can go further. That's a little bit what Manuel was talking about.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what I heard was concrete examples of the cross-sector partnerships, so Telefonica with CDP, with science-based targets, and in-sector collaboration. So Telefonica with its peers, supplier engagement, which reinforces what we heard from the report and what we hear all the time. Why are you setting science-based targets? Well, my biggest customer wants me to. So the power of that cascade, but not just asking, actually helping them, which is what I'm hearing you've been doing. Helping them and working with your peers to help your shared suppliers. Amazing. I'm going to come back to Manuel. Manuel, particularly in the energy space, what do you think keeps driving momentum?
That is a so difficult question because the energy transition, it is the most challenging one, and we know that. But what is the main driver to keep momentum? Actually, there are many, many drivers. We have just finished an event in which we went with Rosa, Caring for Climate, in which we heard information from science. So science, it is one of those drivers. And it is so clear. Johan Rockström mentioned we are failing. 1.5, it is not a target, it's a limit. It's a limit on a race in which there are no second opportunities, and we are failing it. With the current level of commitments, the emissions gap report is telling us that we are moving our temperature to be raised into 2.8. Look the gap. So science is still driving and keep the momentum. And also because science has already told us that we have to walk for transitions. And the most important one is the energy one because it is the main source of emissions. But energy sounds like a simple sector, and it is not. So when we are talking about energy transition, it is about of deploying renewable energy, it is about of promoting energy efficiency, and it is about of phasing out fossil fuels, or to be more formal, transitioning away from fossil fuels, because that is what it was adopted in the global stocktake in the COP28 in the UAE. So science, it is who has provided all of that information, and I think it is important. But I think that it was Liz that used this word that it is so important, competitiveness. Competitiveness, it is what it must move our actions. Because look, and let me add something, it's competitiveness in a time of climate uncertainty. Because, let me put a couple of examples. If you don't have a very well-balanced energy matrix, you can fail because of the climate uncertainty. Look what happened in Ecuador in 2024. Because they bet too much in hydro energy and they had a drought, they had so huge problems with energy shortage for almost 2 months, 14 hours a day of blackouts. Terrible, just because of betting too much in a single source of energy. And in the opposite, I remember Spain that bet a lot on renewable energies 15 years ago, probably too much. So the offer of renewables, it was like, but what happened because of the war in Ukraine? That now Spain it is able to provide energy to the neighborhood, to the European neighborhood. So competitiveness, it is something so important that can drive the energy transition. But there is one more point, synergies. We as WWF, we have an initiative called Clean Action with Iberdrola. And the idea is how can we connect the deployment of renewable energy by protecting biodiversity and rights, and by considering critical minerals, because critical minerals, it is part of that equation. So that is also something important that it is moving the economy. And I have, I think, one more, that it is, okay, 2 more. For sure, in some places, it has been health. So why China started to consider green technology to be adopted? Because of air pollution. You remember that 15, 20 years ago when China started to be worried on what is that level of life, that quality of life that they were providing to their own population? It was exactly the same in Santiago, in Chile. They started to be aware and worried about air quality in cities as in Santiago. And it was that the entry door to move the energy transition. And finally, technology, for sure, technology. That technology is emerging. There is a green boom technology, mostly from China, but not only from China. Prices are dropping, and that is fantastic. I suggest you all to read a very good report by the UN Secretary General Office that it was released in September, before of the UNGA, talking about how much investment we have in renewable energies, how much more jobs renewable energy is creating over fossil fuels. So it is true we still have investment in fossil fuels, but in renewable energies it is 10 times more. So all of that, it is what it is driving the energy transition. It is simple, it is not. Probably the main resistance, and this is my last phrase, it is the fossil fuel industries and the subsidies. Subsidies, it is some to fossil fuels, it is something that until now we have not been yet able to address well. And that is something that we have to work on.
Thanks, Manuel. Rosa. Manuel did a deep dive on energy. Now I'm going to give you a harder job. What trends do you see in other industries? You can choose the ones you want to talk about.
Thank you, Tracy. So, yeah, I think that in Spain and globally, we see that some sectors have bigger challenges for decarbonization than others, while some sectors like energy, for example, have done big progress anyway. There are others with more complex supply chains, maybe, or that but naturally they have higher emissions and they face bigger challenges for these climate ambition targets and for this decarbonization. In the publication we released with the Spanish organization ECODES, the publication is called the Climate Yearbook, or Anuario Climático, we call it. We analyzed the sectors more representative in science-based targets. And we see that globally and also in Spain, these sectors are quite similar. We see that food and beverage, professional services, software and other services, and construction are the more representative sectors. So we see a progress. They are doing a huge progress on setting these targets, but they still face technological challenges, maybe sometimes again with their suppliers, talking about the scope 3 that Laura mentioned. It's sometimes difficult to control or to know how your providers and your supply chain is working on that. So I would like to highlight that. And also talking about transport, for example, which was other of the main sector representatives, we see that technology is again like a key pillar. They face technological challenges for clean fuels. Talking about aviation sector, for example, it's like a huge challenge. So I think we need to keep in mind that this differentiation between one sectors and others. And again, I think that it's key collaboration. It's key to build these exchanges, these cross-sector alliances and opportunities to share these best practices and become with this new innovation and these new strategies to face these challenges.
Thank you. So I see we're a little bit late. I want to go forward and talk about challenges. So building on what Rosa just said, Liz, Neoenergia has just set its science-based targets, but it takes a long time to set targets. And when companies set their targets, they think about how are we going to actually achieve this, right? They start working on their transition plans. They have to explain to their boards that this is possible and we think we can do it. So tell us a little bit about how you have thought about the challenges that Neoenergia is facing, is going to face, and how you're approaching those.
Yeah. First, I think scope free, as you both mentioned, is a huge challenge for everyone, not just for the companies. But I would like to highlight one thing that was very challenge. This is one unique characteristic from Brazil. So our electric matrix is a 90% renewable. So how? So the question was, how do we decarbonize a sector that is almost already decarbonized? So this is something, it's not a problem because I think it's not a problem when you look for the rest of the world, but I think for the companies, it was a huge challenge. So for discuss, because we face a lot of problems to set these targets because we were already very clean. In Neoenergia, our generation is the same, is 90% renewable. And so we create, the electric sector, we create a working group to work together to see the science-based target guide. And our group start with 3 companies and then it becomes bigger. So this year, our group had 4 of the 7 companies, each were in the group, has their targets approved. So we are very happy because we were discussing the methodology, and Iberdrola also helped us a lot. But we don't do nothing together. So we are also advocating in Brazil and Iberdrola and all around the world about climate change. For example, in Brazil, we participate the development plan, the Brazil's climate development plan, and which were launched this year. And this plan, in this plan, we can see 3 key priorities. First one is energy security. I think it's a priority for every country in the world, because energy security for us means the country security. So expanding electrification across the economy, because we know that it helps a lot to decarbonize, and modernizing grid infrastructure, because we need to be efficient. And these efforts reflect our belief that decarbonization is not only about generation, but also, but we can see but we need a systemic transformation. And this involves integrating regulatory clarity, technological innovation, and collaborative governance.
I'm delighted to hear a company talk about regulatory clarity and how important it is to get regulators on board and policymakers to give that level playing field. I'm going to pass to Laura now. Laura, we were talking about challenges, and for companies just starting out on their journey, what tips would you give them? You talked a little bit about supplier engagement before, but let's talk about getting internal buy-in.
Okay, we've talked about competitiveness before. So if you're in a position where you have to start, what I would say is stick to the business model of the company. Try to understand it. Try to learn how others have maybe or very probably started to decarbonize, because sometimes it happens that you hear people talking about how to change the hybrid vehicles of the staff, but they haven't started with the decarbonization of the business model. So my personal main proposal, it's not even an advice, but I would say stick to your business model, try to understand it, try to check what you are doing, what you're not, what you can do, how you can improve. Stick to what it's going to have a bigger impact, at least to start with. Later on, you can go the value chain. You can go and work with other associations, peers, whatever, but try to understand what you're managing, which is not easy, because talking about decarbonization in food and beverages or in telecom sector or in energy has nothing to do one with the other.
Start with your business model and decarbonize that. I'd love it. Okay, I don't know if we're going to have a firm cutoff. Can anyone tell me? Will we have a firm cutoff? Nobody knows. Okay, so we're going to end with a little bit over time. Manuel, instead of doing the challenge, I want you to tell us about, just looking back at the last 10 years, like one of the godfathers of the whole COP system, right? What solutions do you hope will emerge from COP30? But quickly.
Look, my first, I will be less than a minute. I will say something that it could sound a bit naive, but I hope that this COP can help to recover hope in the process. We are in difficult times, and we do need to recover that sense of hope that things are possible, that in a more emotional way. And in a more concrete way, I've already mentioned, for me, this COP must show the level of maturity of the economy to give the right direction to the process. And second, strengthen the accountability rules. Because if things are not working, as for example, and it is not to talk about the private sector, let's go into the public side. NDCs are not enough well-developed or enough ambitious to put the world on track to our objective. And because there are no accountability rules, nobody can point any country to say you are not doing your task. So the point is we have to continue evolving and to make this process more accountable.
Thanks, Manuel. Okay, I'm going to ask each of my remaining panelists, what one thing do you think would move the whole corporate action, high ambition climate action forward? What would you like to see if you had a magic wand?
For me, I would like to bring the title of this event, which is action. I mean, we need to turn ambition into action. We have the knowledge, we have sometimes the resources enough, we have the tools, so now I think it's about implementation. We've been talking about it in these different events these days, so we need to act. We need to act together with the collaborative that we already have, and yeah, that will be my message.
Liz?
For me, this is one very good point that we see here in COP. This COP is the COP of implementation. And we need to act well coordinated with a common purpose to keep 1.5 alive. And the UN Secretary General message was clear. We crossed the 1.5 million limit, sorry, but we still have time. So for me, this is the point.
Amazing. Laura?
I'm gonna repeat to say action, so. So start doing something that makes business sense, of course, start. If you start, it's gonna move forward somehow.
Just start. Okay, so I'm going to close down this panel just with a few observations about what I heard. I have some speaking notes from my team, but I think I prefer to focus on what I've heard from my panelists. So you guys talked about collaboration, both across sector between NGOs and corporates, between corporates and their suppliers, between corporates and their peers. So collaboration seems to be really important. You've talked about ambition, right? Hearing from your parent company and getting inspired by that. Getting inspired by the companies that you're convening and them inspiring each other. You talked about some of the challenges, but also the opportunity that comes from high ambition, using science-based targets, what you learn from others, taking your inspiration from your internal, reasons for setting that ambition and moving forward quickly. We heard about the action agenda, and I think no one will leave this COP without hearing about the action agenda and thinking about what it means. Go across to the action agenda pavilion and learn about those themes and where each and every one of us fits in it, what we can do to contribute to the action agenda. I'm sitting on this stage with two of SBTI's founding partners and co-owners, but also two SBTI companies who also are co-owners of this initiative, because we're doing it together, right? We are looking forward, back 10 years, where we were, handful of companies, some founding partners thinking, oh, we better do something. Today, almost 12,000 companies in this initiative. Looking forward, 10 years from now, goodness knows where we'll be. But we're gonna be there because we did it together. I wanna thank my panelists and thank the Spain Pavilion for hosting us.